All right, guys, thank you for that. And we've got our next live guest on the way for you here this morning. We've got Clarissa Hawes joining us to talk a little bit about some news we brought you yesterday. Clarissa, one of our local companies, Covenant Logistics, in the news, paying out $700,000 in a discrimination settlement. Talk to us a little bit about what's going on.
Sure. Thanks for having me on this morning. Yes, in a deal that was an agreement that was reached in November, Covenant Logistics and its wholly owned subsidiary Transport Management Services agreed to pay $700,000 to settle allegations that it routinely discriminated against non-citizen workers when checking their permission to work in the United States. According to the, that you're allowed to use other forms of ID, like a state ID, and other forms of a driver's license, a unrestricted social security card, as other forms of ID when applying for jobs. But in this case, the DOJ alleges that they were required to show their green cards, that they were and that it discriminated against them that had these other forms of identification. And of course, Covenant, I spoke with or got a statement from Tripp Grant, their executive vice president at Covenant, who said that they agreed to settle the case to avoid a lengthy and costly litigation case, but that in their claims that the DOJ found no instances where they had discriminated against non-citizen drivers by requiring, this form of ID. So it's really, the DOJ, said that they did find instances over a 2-year period that Covenant had routinely discriminated against non-U.S. drivers or workers. That's what they allege, but Covenant said, that there were no specific instances that they found on their half that they did.
Clarissa, is there any indication that the DOJ got tipped off by this, or maybe was this just something that happened in an audit and they just said, we see something funny here, we want to continue to investigate?
Well, it was like an investigated, like Covenant was alerted that there was an investigation launched in 2021 in regard to this issue. And it doesn't say that they were tipped off or if someone had allegations, if they had applied for a job and this occurred. It just said that an investigation was launched and that Covenant was notified in 2021 that they were looking into its hiring practices and alleged, allegations that it discriminated against non-workers by requiring certain specific forms of ID instead of allowing these personnel to, potential employees to provide an array of different, forms of identification that legally, allow them to work in the U.S.
So, Clarissa, I think that this is such an interesting topic because, of course, we know that the workers' rights to choose their own forms of identification are federally protected status. And in the transportation industry in particular, we have a lot of folks who are immigrants, but not necessarily citizens working in this space. Do you think that this could possibly be maybe the start of some more companies coming forward that say, okay, you know what, maybe we've been a little bit too restrictive in our hiring policies and we need to now make sure that we are complying with federal law to avoid a payout like what we're seeing from Covenant?
Absolutely. I think as you see more companies that are, like as drivers, are entering the market that want to work, it's, that absolutely that, companies have to take a closer look at their hiring practices and make sure that they respond and comply with federal law. And so that, it's, oh, sorry.
No, you go ahead.
But I do think that in Covenant's case that they will be required to provide certain identification. They'll also be able to have to provide and train their employees about potential anti-discrimination requirements, and their ongoing employment practices will be subject to monitoring by the DOJ going forward. So I think this puts a lot of carriers, logistics companies, 3PLs on notice that that the DOJ is closely monitoring this requirement.
I think this is really interesting in the fact that, at least from my perspective, it used to be the cases that if someone was going to hire, an immigrant that was more or less going to be illegally working in the United States, perhaps pennies on the dollar, and yet here we have too much, essentially, supervision coming asking for more documentation on this as well. Any other indications in terms of what Covenant may do in relation to this? Obviously, they say nothing happened. They say there's nothing wrong, but anything else that they may have to do as far as the DOJ is concerned, just to make sure that they are on the straight and narrow.
Sure, they will have to train their employees and get them up to speed on the Immigration and Nationality Act, and instances where it could be a violation, a federal violation, that of its anti-discrimination, requirements. Like we're allowed as citizens to provide certain, documentation to work, and they want those, those same to non-citizen, people that that want to work in the U.S. and do have legal documents to be able to provide their as well, like what you can pick from a various form, state ID, unrestricted Social Security cards, things like that, same as U.S. Employees that are seeking work are allowed to provide.
Clarissa, before we let you go, we got a couple of minutes left here. Wanted to touch on Operation Santa and what's going on there in terms of what the USPS needs in terms of getting packages out to families in need.
I rarely get to write about anything happy. And I mean, in this case, when you read the letters, some they bring you to tears, but it's like, it's an opportunity for so many people to do good, like to help, a lot of these kids, they're going to shoot for the moon and ask for the PlayStation 5s and, things like that. But, when you read the letters, it's like, my mom has been, having medical bills, suffering, or we've had car problems or, like health issues, death, in families and where they're just looking out for their mom, saying my mom can't, provide, give us a Christmas this year, but maybe, someone else, like some are asking for electric blankets, things like that, diapers, wipes, for their siblings and things like that. And, that goes a long way. And I know there's so many people out there, that want to help and, they can go to Operation Santa, that has been sponsored by the U.S. Postal Service. You can go to their Operation Santa website and you can read these letters and, you can log in and sign up for the program. And do you have to give them the PS5? No, but there's when that they're going to shoot for the biggest gift that they can find, the iPhones and things like that. But they really, even anything, like they'll say their favorite color is red and you can get them something, on the list that maybe isn't as expensive, as those types of gifts, but to help out a lot of families that all across the country, that are needing a little help this year.
Definitely a great way to help out and give Christmas to kids that may not necessarily get it. Clarissa, thanks so much for joining us.
Sure. Thanks for having me on today.